Welcome to this event, Computer Says No, which is being held as part of the Entrepreneurship Institute's Festival of Disruptive Thinking. My name is Sarah Manda. I am the Head of Communications and Engagement at the Entrepreneurship Institute, and I'm here with this distinguished panel to talk about AI and decision making and when computers don't give you the answer that you always want. For those who aren't familiar with the Entrepreneurship Institute at King's, we believe that everyone can be entrepreneurial, and that entrepreneurial people can help make the world a better place by solving problems to create a healthier, smarter, more equal and sustainable future. Our role is to help the whole King's community develop entrepreneurial mindsets to help them become better creative problem solvers, develop skills that will make them more employable, come up with more disruptive and innovative ideas, as well as start and scale successful startups. So, computer algorithms are used to make automated decisions about us every single day. From our A-level results to mortgage applications, school catchment areas, employment decisions, even your COVID-19 vaccination and sentencing in court case. There's no doubt that this new technology comes with its benefits. Processes are more efficient, fewer mistakes are made, and costs are saved. But what about when things go wrong? With AI making the processes even more complex, what happens if we don't like one of the decisions that's made on our behalf? How do we know if we can even challenge them? I'm here today to speak to us about these complexities and these challenges. We have Luke Moreau, a professor in computer science and the head of Department of Informatics at King's College London. Luke is renowned for his work on provenance, both provenance of data and provenance of things. Luke was the chair of the W3C Provenance Working Group, which resulted in a standard model for provenance. In the PLEAD project with his collaborators, he's using provenance of decisions to construct explanations for these kind of AI decisions that we are talking about today. We also have Sophie Stalla-Bourdillon, my apologies, who's a professor of information technology law and data governance within Southampton's Law School at the University of Southampton. She's also a senior privacy counsel and legal engineer at Immuta. Her research focuses on platform responsibility, data governance and data sharing models, and privacy and data protection, with a special emphasis on the legal and ethical implications of data operations within analytic environments. We also have Niko Tsakalakis, a research fellow at the University of Southampton, working on the implications of disruptive technologies for data protection and on ways to engineer data protection in the design of complex IT systems. For this PLEAD project, Niko runs the analysis for the explainability requirements and how this could be operationalized by a provenance-driven explanation system. And then finally, we have Huynh, a research fellow at King's College London with experience in tracking the flows and use of data with provenance technology and a wide range of applications. He led on the development of demonstrators showcasing provenance-driven explanations for automated decisions at explain.provenance.org. There's quite a mouthful there, but welcome to our distinguished panel. I'm going to pass over to Luke now, who is going to introduce us to the disruptive Computer Says No.
Thank you, Sarah. As Sarah was saying, over the last few years, AI has made remarkable progress and has been deployed in many different contexts: science, employment, justice, finance. And at the same time, there's been increasing awareness of the problems associated with AI. And bias, for instance, is frequently mentioned. In particular, some of you may know about machine learning, and you train models using some data set. And if your training data set is poor, it is likely that there will be potential bias in the AI system. But this is not just a question of bias. Systems make decisions, and there is little understanding of why decisions were taken and whether there was any human involvement in the decisions, and ultimately who bears responsibility for the decisions. On the left-hand side, you see a picture of the drone that was recently making the news because it autonomously took a decision to kill. The question is, what should human involvement be in that context? Likewise, we've all heard stories about autonomous vehicles involved in crash. Who bears the responsibility here when we have such a type of accident? So, next slide, please, Dong. From all corners of the planet, there are calls for transparency, for accountability, and for explainability. And some economic sectors, such as credit rating in finance, have had a requirement for explanations for quite some time. But the change now is that there is a drive for explainability across the board in all sectors, and we see new regulatory frameworks emerging in many countries. For instance, you may have heard about the famous GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, the UK Data Protection Bill. Well, according to them, organizations in some specific circumstances have a duty to provide explanations about decisions they make about users. But the law is not prescriptive on how to achieve this. So guidance is emerging, like the one on the right-hand side from the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, but still the guidance remains challenging to implement and to put in practice. That's where we come in. We are the PLEAD project. PLEAD is an acronym standing for Provenance-Driven and Legally Grounded Explanations for Automated Decisions. That's a very big area. We focus on a small part of that problem. We are a multidisciplinary team, so we bring legal experts and computer scientists, and our focus is on decision-making rather than trying to explain specific AI technologies such as machine learning. And our aim is to operationalize explainability to make it practical so that businesses can deploy those ideas and consumers benefit from them.
Every day, organizations use computers to make decisions that impact our lives. These could be life-defining decisions, like what schools our children are allocated to, or whether a mortgage application is accepted or rejected. But what if the computer says no? Well, we have the right to challenge these decisions and to understand if they were fairly made. What was the provenance of the decision? In other words, what data was used? Where did that data come from? How was it used to make the decision? And was the decision fully automated without any human involvement? In response to the growing demand for transparency and accountability around automated decision-making, PLEAD is developing the Explanation Assistant. It turns descriptions of the flow of data in a decision-making system into meaningful explanations. The Explanation Assistant helps organizations demonstrate that they comply with legal regulations and makes it easier to explain complex decisions to their customers, reassuring them that their data was processed as expected. More transparency, improved customer satisfaction, a win-win for all.
So as Sarah introduced a bit earlier, we look into different scenario of automated decision making. And one of the scenario that we look into is when you apply for a school place, which happen every year in the UK. So most people apply for a school place for their children by their local council. In an application, you can specify more than one preference, similar to applying for university. Each school will have a specific criteria to decide which children get their places. This can include information like how close you live to the school, if you have all the children at the school already, or if you follow a particular religion. Your response to each of those criteria will be weighted, with some being of a priority to a certain school more than others. So let's imagine a school you want your child to go to is usually oversubscribed, receive too many applications for the number of places that they have. You live 1 mile from the school in the school's catchment area. Would that be enough to secure a place? That would depend on the criteria that I just mentioned. For example, if this is your first child at a school and there are lots of applications from children with siblings who are already there, your application will be moved down the ranking list. There were about 600,000 applications in the UK primary and secondary school last year alone. And imagine having to access each of those applications individually and then cross-reference them against all the other applications made to the same school. You can see why algorithms are of great value, helping automate the decision-making process and lift a huge burden off school and council staff. But some also argue that these criteria can lead to inequalities. For example, families from low-income areas will be prioritized for local neighborhood school, which might not be of as high quality as the a bit further afield. Alongside of this, parents might feel as though they are on the receiving end of a computer say no decision if they don't get the first choice they apply for. 8 out of 10 children get into their first choice school, so that leaves 2 out of 10 who don't, and a lot of parents want to know why.
Right. I can take over, and I'll be talking about the use of algorithms in finance. So the example of decisions I would like to talk to you about is the cases of loans or credits with banks and financial services. So if you've ever applied for a loan or a credit card or a mortgage in the last decade, the decision was likely taken or assisted by a computer model. Most financial service providers in the UK use credit rating systems, often provided by third parties, to help them decide whether to offer credit. Think of credit reports or credit ratings as an estimate of someone's ability to repay a loan as the creditworthiness. Now, algorithms are generally speaking used to decide how risky it would be to offer somebody credit and then accept or reject the borrowing request. For example, they will look at whether you've taken similar loans in the past or whether you have ever missed a loan payment. Companies use algorithms because they are faster and because they're more accurate. They are faster because decisions can be made in seconds, and this introduces huge efficiencies and proves particularly helpful in low-risk situations like small loans. And they are more accurate because they can outperform a human. Credit ratings were historically carried out by loan officers, but people come with biases, and machines, on the other hand, only observe the rules they've been programmed with. And most importantly, humans have a limited capacity for information processing. In contrast, machines can consume millions of data points and analyze them to produce a decision. The premise, therefore, is that algorithmic decisions for creditworthiness are more accurate because they take into account more information, possibly all information about an individual that can be expressed in data. So credit ratings aside, algorithms are used to combat financial frauds, to support trading, to run personalized banking services. Algorithms have revolutionized banking as we know it. But as with any innovation, there are risks that we need to keep an eye on. Familiar risks like discrimination are present here, but the key risk is the lack of transparency. Because algorithms can consume an infinite number of data, it is practically impossible for an individual applying for credits to understand precisely which information a decision was based on. And as the decision-making process typically involves multiple parties, it can be difficult to pinpoint who to turn to when things go wrong. So at this point, I'll hand back to Sarah, and she's going to run some questions with you guys.
Excellent. So I think we're going to enable the poll EV link again to go through some questions with the audience. Which information do you think would have an impact on your credit application? So as someone like myself who is very nervous about potential credit applications, you know, what kind of information do you think a bank or a credit lender might be taking into consideration? Amazing. Okay, so we have status, mortgage rent, age, income, color, education. I'm hoping that criminal record, that's not just criminal. Immigration, gender, marriage. Great. These are all excellent. Well, excellent or not excellent, depending on, you know, whether or not it's your credit that's being assessed. All right, shall we move on to the next one? So who would you turn to for questions about a credit decision? Bank seems like a pretty obvious one. Experienced lenders, colleagues. I would definitely be asking people I know, that kind of word of mouth thing. Union, citizens advice, that's an excellent one. We got transition, Equifax. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people will be going to the kind of bank and the organization that's doing the lending. Martin Lewis, is that I don't know if Martin Lewis is a person or an organization. Family, I'd definitely be asking my parents. Advisors, great. All right, shall we move on to the next one, Dom? And finally, what would help you understand a lending decision better? Oh, I feel like this one's coming in a different time. Okay, a different way. Okay, more accessible information, clearer terms, repayment times, see all the criteria considered. So generally, I think, you know, what everyone's saying is, you know, better, more accessible information. So we've got the real reason for the rejection. Absolutely. Fabulous. Okay, well, I think if there's no other, oh wait, here we go. Yeah, what you can do to get the loan, exactly. So I think that's a really important part, is kind of like constructive criticism, isn't it? Or a constructive rejection, something to be able to help you try a second time. All right, so now we're going to watch a short demo showcasing a vision of the kind of explanations that are being provided at the point of a decision that's made by a computer.
In this demo, I'm going to show you the kind of explanation that we at the PLEAD project believe the customer should receive when applying for, say, a credit card. This demonstrator simulates the process where someone fills in a credit card application and submits it to a bank. When the bank receives the application, it would do a routine credit search on the applicant and then receive a credit report from a CRA or a credit referencing agency. Based on the customer application here, their credit report, and sometimes all the information it has about the customer, the bank would then decide whether to issue a new credit card to the customer. Here, the bank's decision making is simulated. For this demonstration, the data on this application page are all fictitious and randomly generated. This is the result of the credit card application we have just submitted. It was unfortunately rejected. You see here the letter that a customer would receive. It has been generated by the explanation assistant we developed in PLEAD. But before we go into the content of the letter, for this application, I would like to point out that we recorded all the data and actors that play some role in the decision in an audit trail, or what we call the provenance of the decision, in which you can see the flow of data, which provider they were from, and who was responsible for certain processes to arrive at the final decision at the end here. From this audit trail, the explanation assistant generated the sentences you see in this letter. The red text highlight the data elements that were queried from the audit trail to construct the sentences. First, the customer is provided with the reason for the refusal, which is low credit score. The explanation here is personalized to the customer. Then he or she is explained how the decision was made in a bit more detail and learn about the key data that were used by the bank and which organizations provided them. These explanations are descriptive. Finally, the customer is informed about their right and which action they could take if they're not happy with the decision. They could ask for a human to review the decision, contact the bank for more information, or request a correction of their data. The explanation here is targeted. Okay, so this is the example of what we would like to see available to the customer at the point where he or she receives an automated decision. I hope you like the explanation we produce here. To learn more about the project, please visit our website at plead-project.org. Thank you.
Great. So I'll pass on to Luke now to tell us about how this is actually a really disruptive concept.
Thank you, Sarah. So what we wanted to do is to try and operationalize the type of legal framework or the type of guidance we can see emerging across the world. And so in the PLEAD project, we have produced a series of recipes that businesses can follow. And when I say businesses, it's also their programmers that they can follow in order to build systems that are going to construct meaningful explanations. And that's what we call the PLEAD methodology. But a methodology, recipes, that's ultimately yet another set of documents. And there are already lots of them out there. So we wanted something that was very practical. And the disruptive idea that we put forward in PLEAD is that we have produced some software that can help businesses produce those explanations. And for that, they just need to follow the methodology and exploit the service, exploit the software. And that piece of software, as you have seen earlier, that's what we call the explanation assistant. So this first disruptive idea is really targeting businesses. In the second disruptive idea, the focus is on the consumers. We've seen that in today's world, decisions rely on data coming from many different systems. And at the moment, explanations tend to come from the decision maker. For instance, when a bank is telling you that you cannot have a loan, you are not granted a loan, the bank is relying on data coming from other organizations, such as credit rating agencies. The disruptive idea that PLEAD is bringing forward is that explanations can cover the whole data supply chain, from the original data being collected potentially about you, leading to the decisions made by the decision makers. And so essentially PLEAD puts the onus on the decision makers to assemble explanations that are complete and extensive for the benefit of the consumers. In today's world, the consumer will have just information about the decision and will have a reference potentially about the data coming from a credit rating agency. And it will be up to the consumer to go to the credit rating agency to find out how that data was obtained. And if it needs changing, we'll have to interact with the credit rating agency. So here we've got the ability with the explanation assistant to combine parts of explanations coming from the whole supply chain and offer a complete explanations to the benefit of consumers. I will hand over to Sophie now for the next disruptive ideas.
So building on what Luke has been saying, one core vision underlying the approach is actually that in order to understand the impact of the legal framework and its outreach, it's essential to adopt a legal engineering approach. It's the only way to reconcile the two sides here. To take an example, so GDPR, for example, the General Data Protection Regulation has been criticized by many for different reasons, not always the same ones, either because it's impossible to implement or because it's not going far enough. In PLEAD, we think that there is a possibility to find the middle ground, and we do that by developing a methodology and an approach that requires, as I said, some legal engineering methodology. So that means looking at concrete implementation to understand what are the options that are available in order to try to find a way to comply with the requirements, and try to shoot for the implementations that are the most beneficial to the individuals or the consumers, as Luc was trying to describe. What is a legal engineer? Yeah, just before, what is a legal engineer? It's a role that work at the interface of law and technology and is able to set requirements that can be implemented by the data engineer, so the more technical roles. And this is what we've been trying to do in PLEAD. Going beyond that, so as Luc mentioned, and Dong also mentioned when he was talking to describing the loan application, we think that's an approach, the approach that we've been unpacking and building in PLEAD as a potential for supporting the development of robust artificial intelligence. If you look at the way new proposals in the field, in particular in the EU, but also beyond the EU, in America, Canada, US, what you find at the foundation of the proposals is a set of requirements that start from their quality and their relevance, include some form of minimization, resilience, cybersecurity. Also ask for maximum audits and data usage observability. And then again, as we spoke about at the beginning, explanation and interpretability. And in PLEAD, we think that there is a potential to leverage explanations, computable explanations, and use them as deductive controls in order to build robust AI. And we've been developing this approach by combining two things here. So an approach that is usually used among GRC folks, governance, risk, and compliance communities, who are looking at different types of controls in order to build compliance strategies, and then combining this with the requirements that are emerging for regulating AI. So that would be it for the disruptive thoughts in relation to the legal approach.
Great, thank you, Sophie. So we've got one more poll that we're going to add. So thinking about the kinds of decisions that might be made for you by a computer or an AI, how important is it for you to have a detailed explanation? And in the poll EV, you'll see a series of different events in which this could happen, everything from, as we've spoken about, credit cards or school places to your job or your next Netflix recommendation. So it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on what is really important to, for you to have a detailed explanation for each one. Well, there we go. Job applications. Well, nope, now credit cards. Definitely an access to medical treatment coming in as first. I love the ability to read this live. No one's really that bothered about toothbrush ads. That's interesting. Fantastic. So I will also, while we're doing this and while I've got you guys nice and engaged, I'm going to invite some questions from the audience. I obviously have a couple of questions of my own, but please do either raise your hand or write your question in the chat if you have a question for anyone on the panel or the whole panel. While this is kicking off, I'm going to put a question out to any of you. One or all of you could answer this. I'm really interested in who who's doing this really well at the moment? What kind of organizations are giving really robust, transparent explanations to these kinds of decisions?
Who is taking this? Anybody? So I think the answer, or one of the answers, is we don't know. We are at a point still that we need to define what is a robust explanation. So we are still fighting for terminology, but also we are at a point where we need to persuade organizations that they have a duty to explain things to the customers more than depending on your data or with your information that you've provided, we decided this. There are initiatives. So we know that there are initiatives, for example, in Australia, where banks are trying to chain explanations from the credit agencies, including the bank decisions, and produce an explanation from start to finish to the customer. But I don't know whether that is still a product that is on the market or not. Sorry, Luke, go ahead.
So first, our project partners are doing it well, that we should say. But actually, they're doing it well, but possibly with yesterday's technology. And some of our partners are spending a lot of money to run call centers. Call centers that are open when letters are issued to parents with decisions about school allocations, or call centers that you can call in about your credit rating and maybe requests for changes to data and so on. And so at the moment, that's how organization offers this type of service, and it's very expensive to them. So their interest is to see whether we can automate this part of explainability. And it could be that call centers will remain because the human, it's not clear that just a computer providing the answer will be satisfactory. It's still something to be proven, but it is clear that support for people in call centers so that they can look at this decision for school allocation and see the rationale for the decision and present that to the caller would be also very useful. So we can see the use of the explanation assistant targeting directly the end consumer, but also potentially people in call centers.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of, Sophie, you mentioned GDPR as part of this, and the fact that, as part of GDPR, we have to kind of consent to our information being used. Can an organization process your data if they don't have your consent, particularly when we're dealing with second, third, fourth parties down the line?
So under GDPR, consent is not the only legal basis that can be used for an organization to process the data. There are other possible legal bases, in particular, one that is often mentioned, the legitimate interest of the data controller. What needs to happen, though, is that even if an alternative legal basis is being used, the individual needs to be informed about what's happening with the data. And therefore, what we've been actually looking at in PLEAD is also a way to use explanations as a way also to inform individuals even before anything is happening, in order to generate information about general trends within the system and in order to form expectations, individual expectations. So yeah, the quick answer is no. Consent is not the legal basis, the only one that can be used under GDPR. But what is of paramount importance is to inform individuals about the way processing is happening within the organization.
Great, thank you. We have a controversial question from the audience, which I'll read out. So how prominent do you perceive the threat of AI to be? As global business leaders such as Elon Musk are viewing the threat of AI to be more likely than the threat of nuclear warfare, do you think we need to be heavily concerned? And what solutions do you think would be applicable to the threat of AI? Anyone from the panel want to take this one?
So personally, I don't see AI overtaking control of the world and us leaving us totally dependent on AI. This is not going to happen, certainly anytime soon.
Yeah, so as far as I understand as well, we're not at the point yet of an autonomous artificial intelligence. So if something bad happens with AI, it'll probably be some kind of user error. It'll probably be a human that hasn't coded something well. But as far as measures that we can take against anything bad happening, where we are at the moment with the trend of trying to incorporate technical controls and creating legislation that demands technical controls be incorporated into technical solutions, I think is a good step. This is a very topical question, as the UK has launched a consultation trying to relax the technical safeguards that companies would have to take when deploying AI, because they view them as sometimes stifling innovation. So I think there's going to be a back and forth between how much regulation is enough over the coming days or years even.
Really interesting. And Leonardo, don't apologize for the controversy. This is the Festival of Disruptive Thinking. You are on brand there. I've got a bit of a follow-up question if we're going to court controversy around dystopian futures. I'm really interested in the idea of a potential rejection that cannot be challenged and the ripple effects on that on other applications. So say, for example, you have a mortgage application that's denied, and therefore that gives you, the kind of knock-on effect of one rejection to potentially other ones. Is this something we should be potentially worried about if we don't take these steps and put in these kind of technical safeguards?
Well, I'd say yes. So we are already living with lots of automation, even if we don't necessarily see that. Be it only partially automated or fully automated, but the less we understand how we reach a specific outcome, the more we are creating obviously transparency and accountability issues. And what we are seeing actually is that among the supply chain, as Luc was mentioning, several actors are relying on past decisions issued by others. And this can only be the trend that will increase. So we need to act as early as possible and inject some transparency mechanism within the chain and in different places as much as possible.
I'm also really interested in the kind of incentives you spoke about, Niko. Oh, sorry, Luc, I'll let you jump.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to add something to that, and my legal colleagues will come to the rescue with the right terminology. But is in the case that in the GDPR, when a decision can be, and I'm going to use the wrong word here, but harmful for the data subject, there are some obligations that is placed on the data controllers. Could you comment on that? Because I think that's somehow a safeguard, or a beginning of safeguard, that is being introduced, because what you're talking about here, Sarah, is harmful consequences, sequence of automated decisions. Could you comment on this, Sophie or Niko?
Yeah. So, Sophie, do you want to go ahead? I don't mind.
Go ahead, and I can follow.
You are right. GDPR does have safeguards for automated decisions. They don't have to produce harmful effects for the safeguards to be activated. What is required is that the decision is solely automated, so there's no human input, or no meaningful human input anyways. In which case, if you are the subject of a decision that was taken by automated means without meaningful human input, then you have the right to get an explanation, and you have the right to ask for a human review if for some reason you don't agree with the decision, and you have the right to express your point of view regarding the decision. So yes, obviously that will happen more often when harm has been done by the decision, but I don't think it's necessary for harm to materialize to trigger the safeguards.
So yeah, the test is whether the automated processing produces legal effects concerning the individual, or significantly affect the individual. This is, as Niko said, only relevant for solely automated processing, as if you read Article 22 of the GDPR. So here there is debate about what is the exact scope of that article, and how far, how robust actually is the safeguard that is being granted to the individual. Many legal commentators at the beginning, when the GDPR was adopted, were thinking that it was actually a very weak legal protection. A few decisions have been released in some jurisdictions, Netherlands, I think, and a few other places. The judges are trying to understand how this could be applied in order to give some form of protections to individuals, but I'm not sure it's clear yet as to whether that is an effective safeguard or not. And in fact, in the consultation that Niko mentioned, there is discussion as to what to do with this Article 22, and the ICO is suggesting that this the scope of the article should be extended and cover also partly automated decision-making systems.
Dong, do you want to, I see you've got something to say.
I would just like to add to the, I think one word that Sophie mentioned, transparency. So we at King's, specifically the team that looks at in recording the audit trails of decision making. So I alluded to that in my demo. So all the explanation that we generated are produced from the audit trails of the whole decision making process. And we are doing research into or helping the audit trail to be recorded in let's say in another project with AI assistant like Alexa, Microsoft or Google services, and in another we also looking at how to record the audit trails of decision making in robotic system. So I suppose this is also related to the first questions about AI taking over the world. It is, we are concerning about this prospect because we don't understand what's going on behind the scene. We don't know why certain action has been taken by AI. And I hope that by developing those technology and make it easier to be adopted in practice, we would be able to look inside some of the thinking or some of the dependency, what data was used when the decision was made, and then we can understand and even develop like automated techniques to make sure that the right data was used, the appropriate process was followed, and ensure some safety and security aspect of those applications.
Niko, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, sorry, just one last thing about the safeguards, because Sophie mentioned the consultation, and rightfully so. I think it's important, since we are living in the UK, it would be important for the audience to know that part of the consultation is a proposal by the government to remove Article 22 from UK data protection, and in particular, the rights to request human review when you have a solely automated decision. This is where the ICO responded that not only this shouldn't be removed, but it should be extended to partially automated decisions, as Sophie mentioned. But it is a time where I think the public should know what's at stake and what changes are being proposed.
Great, thank you. We've got another question from the audience for anyone in relation to equality, and the example here is university applications. So the question is, or questions are, there's two. Do you think, so would you like to see that over the years, unis and more companies adopting AI to run profiling to be more accurate based on previous data? Do you think that this will lead to greater inequality on job rejections or uni rejections because of that cases of human review will eventually prolong the process? Sorry, I think I'm not reading this correctly. But are you getting you can see the question there, yeah. So questions about equality and inequality when it comes to AI decision making.
It's a very difficult problem. I mean, there is a famous company which will remain nameless. They run some AI in order to essentially train a model to decide which job to offer. And after a little while, it turned out they were offering jobs to men and never to women, if I paraphrase the story. And that's back to the problem I was mentioning earlier about the data that you use to train your AI. If you have a poor training data set because currently your workforce is mostly men, you are therefore likely to train a model that will prefer men over women, okay? And we can apply that to lots of other characteristics. It's not just gender. It can also apply to origin of students for doing studies at universities. It's a very general problem. So the AI community is really aware of that. The algorithms themselves do not have bias. At least we don't think at this point that they have bias. However, we don't have the science yet of selecting the right data set. It's still an art in order to select the data set for training, and there is some guidance that is emerging, but I don't think this is robust yet. So it's something that needs to be monitored very, very carefully. And in particular, again, the need for being able to explain what was being made and have enough information for not only the consumers or the students or the job applicants, but also the organizations to try and understand what the system does and correct as soon as possible. I think that is really important.
Great, thank you. I just want to check, does that answer your question? Got a couple of people chatting, so you've obviously sparked someone's imagination there, Luke. Great, thank you. So it does answer the question. I'll let this one person in the audience finish up their question. Or if it's taking too long, you can turn your mic on and ask the question to the panel. Oh, here we go. Okay, relating back to a dystopian society. we love a dystopian society in this disruptive thinking festival. If AI was to get to a point where many occupations, such as accountancy, became obsolete, many banking services offer AI accounting and bookkeeping, where do you see the need for human beings in this society?
Well, I guess being the lawyer, I'd say I'd like to hope that we won't arrive there. Compliance cannot be fully automated. And so if it is true that automation or in PLEAD computable explanations can help with demonstrating compliance and supporting legal and ethical data processing, we'll still need humans in order make sense of the system and assess the system using potentially automated reports, but to make it compliance decisions, we will need, I think, human assessment. So it's a matter of focusing the human attention to the points that really matter, and try to streamline as much as possible the process. That will mean reducing human intervention, but there will still be we will still need the human in order to be able to make the final claim that it is fully compliant.
Great.
So
Go on.
auditing.
Luke, you've got your hand up, and then Niko, I know you were going to say something, so let's go in that order. Luke?
I think it's a problem that has been, or it's a question that has been raised for all technologies since the Industrial Revolution. I think the question was there when the steam engine came, when electricity came, when telegraph came. And now that's AI. I think it's true that there will be jobs that disappear, but there will be new jobs that are created, and we don't know yet all of those jobs that will be created. I can also point to what is it? We've got a shortage of 5,000 or so GPs in the country at the moment. How are we going to fill that gap? I don't see actually students rushing, applying for medical studies in the UK for us to have the right level of GP support. So, we live longer and longer, and health problems will keep on occurring. So it's an area where clearly support for the GP to make better and faster decisions would be really welcome. So there are some real benefits as well that we should not underestimate.
Great. Thank you. Niko, did you have something to say on this?
Just very briefly, that this is a very philosophical question, and I remember growing up, we were promised that there will come a time where automation will make our life easier, so that we can, all humans would do would be arts and leisure, and the real meaning of life. So we are approaching this state, and suddenly we're realizing that this is not what we actually wanted. So I'm just very interested in watching what happens in this space.
I think we have the makings of a really great sci-fi film here. With that, I will leave it there. But thank you so much to our panel. You've all been fantastic. I think we've learned a lot about safeguards and GDPR and some kind of dystopian future. But it's all in the spirit of the disruptive thinking and this festival. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.